Welcome to Workplace English. Today we're looking at how a product manager works.
Yeah, it's such a fascinating role to dig into.
Right, because for this deep dive, we're really decoding the undocumented language of this specific position. I mean, if you walk into like any modern tech company, the person with the most influence over what actually gets built usually writes zero code.
Right? They design zero interfaces,
Exactly, and they have zero direct reports. They just operate in this strange space between every major department.
which is arguably the most high-stakes translation job out there. I mean, you have highly specialized teams, engineering, design, marketing,
Oh, yeah.
and they all essentially speak different languages. They have completely different goals.
Mhm.
So the product manager, or PM, is the one forced to sit right in the middle of all that friction.
Which is why the source material for today is so cool. It's essentially this very simple guide to workplace English, but specifically tailored to the PM role.
Yeah, it strips away all the usual corporate jargon.
Right. It just looks at the basic mechanics, what they actually do, where they work, and the literal exact phrases they use to survive the day.
And looking at the role through that lens of basic vocabulary is incredibly revealing. Because the tech industry, they love to mythologize their job titles.
Oh, totally. Ninja, rock star, all of that.
Exactly. But when you look at the raw phrases PMs actually rely on, you realize their entire job is just navigating human behavior. So whether you're working with a PM or you just want to understand how software gets made, dissecting their language is the fastest way to understand the job.
So let's start with their core mission. Our source lays out the primary responsibility in very simple terms. They build and improve products to deliver value to users.
Right. That's the ultimate goal.
But to actually do that, they sit at the center of this cross-functional hub. They have to wrangle engineering, design, and marketing all at once. Kind of reminds me of the conductor of an orchestra.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, like engineering is the brass section, design is the strings, marketing is the percussion. The PM doesn't actually play any of the instruments, but they have to ensure everyone is playing the exact same song.
That makes a lot of sense. Another way to think about it mechanically is that the PM acts like an API.
An API, like the software term.
Yeah, an application programming interface.
Hmm.
In software, an API is the translation layer you need between two systems that are totally incompatible.
Oh, I see.
The PM is basically the human API for the company.
That's a great analogy. Because, I mean, if the engineering team is this complex back-end system focused on reducing technical debt, and marketing is just focused on getting new users, those systems are going to clash.
Constantly. I mean, marketing wants a massive new referral program launched by Friday to hit a quarterly goal.
Right.
But engineering looks at that same request and just sees a structural nightmare that will crash the database.
Okay.
Both teams are acting rationally based on their own goals.
So the PM is the API sitting between them.
Exactly. They take the request from marketing, filter it through the constraints of engineering, and try to architect a solution that delivers value without breaking the company.
Okay, so the source lists the actual daily tasks required to run that API layer. It says they define product requirements, prioritize features, work with developers, analyze user feedback, and plan the product roadmap.
Right. That's the daily grind.
But looking at that list, I have to play devil's advocate for a second. If their whole day is just planning, analyzing, and working with developers, do they actually build the product themselves? Or are they just, glorified project managers directing traffic?
There's the massive difference there. Project managers track timelines and resources. They make sure the train runs on time.
Okay.
Product managers determine where the track should be laid in the first place. And more importantly, they determine if a train is even the right vehicle for the user's problem.
Ah, got it.
The source is very clear that they define requirements with the teams. They aren't just passing messages back and forth. They are actively synthesizing all those constraints.
So they have to understand the engineer's technical limits, the designer's visual language, and the marketer's strategy all at the same time, just to find that one little overlapping sliver of reality where a feature can actually exist.
Yeah, and that synthesis requires a very specific environment. You can't just manage that much friction in a vacuum.
Right. Which brings us to where they work and the tools they use. Our guide points out that PMs are essential everywhere, from like scrappy startups to massive, large organizations.
The scale changes, but the tension is always there.
Exactly. But what's interesting is their utility belt. The guide lists 4 universal tools they use: Jira, Notion, Figma, and analytics tools. Considering they work in such different environments, Why are these specific tools the universal baseline?
Well, PMs are the bridge between technical execution and user-facing visuals. So they need tools that map out workflows, document ideas, and analyze numbers across all those different disciplines.
I always just pictured Jira as a giant to-do list for developers, to be honest.
I mean, it is a to-do list. But in the hands of a PM, a Jira ticket is basically a negotiated settlement.
What do you mean by that?
Let's say the PM is working with design in Figma. Now, Figma is aspirational. It's this perfect, pixel-perfect vision of what the interface should look like.
Right, looks beautiful.
But Figma doesn't care about back-end server loads. So the PM takes that aspirational Figma file and translates it into a Jira ticket for the engineers. They have to break the beautiful design down into hard, logical steps.
And during that translation, I imagine they inevitably have to make compromises.
Oh, definitely. The engineers will look at the Jira ticket and say, well, we can't build this specific animation without rewriting our whole architecture.
Which forces the PM to go back to the designer and negotiate a simpler animation.
Exactly. Meanwhile, they're using Notion to document the overarching strategy, the why behind the feature.
So that when the designer and engineer inevitably get frustrated with each other, the PM can just point to Notion and remind everyone of the broader goal.
You got it. And the analytics tools sit underneath all of it. They serve as the reality check to tell them if that compromised feature actually worked once it launched.
So they're just seamlessly floating between all four of these tools, acting as the connective tissue.
But navigating that much friction requires unbelievable diplomacy, because you have no direct authority over these people. You lead entirely by influence.
And this is where the source material gets super practical. Working across all those tools and teams requires very specific communication. The guide actually provides a literal phrase book for PMs.
The exact sentences they use to exert influence.
Yes. Let me read the first two exact phrases from the source. They say, we need to prioritize this feature, and this is aligned with our product goals.
See, those aren't just corporate pleasantries. Those phrases are defense mechanisms.
Defense mechanisms.
Yeah. A PM is constantly under siege. The CEO reads an article about AI and suddenly wants to pivot the whole product. Or the sales team loses a client and demands a completely random new feature.
Right. Everyone wants their shiny new object. And if you say yes to the CEO and yes to sales and yes to marketing, the engineering team gets completely paralyzed.
Nothing ships. So the PM's primary job is to protect the engineering bandwidth. But you can't just tell the CEO their idea is terrible.
Obviously not.
So you use the phrase book. You say, this is aligned with our product goals. It's a highly effective, depersonalized way of filtering out distractions.
It's like a captain steering a ship. You have this crew of smart people, and everyone is spotting interesting islands on the horizon, shouting about where to go next.
Right?
But the PM is the one standing at the wheel, looking at the map, saying, this is aligned with our product goals. Every feature has to push the boat in the direction you decided on months ago, or it gets thrown overboard.
That's exactly it. The phrasing implies a pre-agreed-upon system. It reminds the room that these goals were already debated and locked in.
It neutralizes the hierarchy. It forces the executive to explain why their spontaneous idea is more important than the goals the whole company already agreed to.
But there's a danger there. If you're constantly shutting down ideas by pointing to the goals, those goals had better be anchored to something bulletproof.
Yeah, if the PM is just sitting in a room inventing goals out of thin air, that defense collapses immediately. The engineers will see right through it.
Which leads to how they actually validate those goals. They anchor them to the one entity that outranks everyone in the company, the user.
Okay, and our source has a second set of phrases entirely focused on this. Let me read the final three phrases from the PM phrasebook.
Go for it.
It says, we should focus on user needs. Then, this feature adds value to the product. And finally, we need to improve the user experience.
Now, on their own, those phrases sound like the worst kind of corporate buzzwords.
They really do. Like, everyone claims to care about the user. The sales team thinks their random feature is a user need. The CEO thinks their AI idea adds value to the product.
That's the risk. If a PM just repeats, we need to improve the user experience just to win an argument, it feels totally hollow.
So how do they weaponize those phrases so they actually mean something?
They connect those phrases directly to their daily tasks and tools. Remember, the source explicitly says a core PM task is analyzing user feedback.
Right, using those analytics tools.
Exactly. The best PMs never say we should focus on user needs empty-handed. They use it as the introduction to a data set.
Oh, so they use the data to depersonalize the conflict.
Precisely. Let's say there's a huge turf war between design and engineering over a checkout button. Design wants a gorgeous, custom interaction.
And engineering probably wants to use the native out-of-the-box button because it's already perfectly stable.
Right. They could argue for weeks, but the PM steps in and says, we need to improve the user experience.
But they don't just stop there.
No, they pull up the analytics. They say, right now we have a 40% drop-off rate at this specific stage of checkout. And I've read 300 support tickets where users couldn't figure out how to pay.
Wow. So suddenly, improving the user experience isn't just a vague philosophy, it's a highly specific, quantitative crisis.
And it reframes the whole debate. The designer has to accept their beautiful button might be causing the drop-off. The engineer has to accept the native button might be confusing.
The data strips away their departmental biases. It forces them to collaborate on a solution that actually adds value to the product.
The source notes that PMs must explain ideas clearly and make decisions based on user needs and data. When you ask engineers to scrap a week's worth of work, you can't just say, because my roadmap says so.
You have to clearly explain the user pain point.
Yes, you need the data to prove that pain point exists. The data is their only real authority.
So they translate a qualitative complaint, like someone angrily tweeting about the app, into a quantitative data point. And then they translate that into a Jira ticket.
And then they translate the final feature back to the marketing team so they can sell it. It's just an endless loop of translation, alignment, and prioritization.
So zooming all the way out, this simple guide actually outlines the blueprint of modern technological progress.
It really does.
A product manager isn't just someone who uses Jira and recites phrases. They use clear communication, specific tools, and hard data to force completely different disciplines to compromise. And they do it all to achieve a single goal, delivering user value.
It requires remarkable balance. You need deep empathy to understand the user's struggle, the analytical rigor to prove it with data, and the political diplomacy to convince exhausted engineers to actually build it.
It's definitely a fascinating role to decode, but, considering how heavily they rely on data to make every single decision, I'm actually curious about the logical extreme of this framework.
That is the exact tension worth exploring. I mean, think about it. If your entire communication style and decision-making process are strictly anchored to analyzing user feedback and data,
Yeah.
what happens to pure radical innovation?
Oh, because data, by definition, only tells you about the past.
Exactly. It only tells you what users did yesterday. User feedback only tells you what the user is frustrated by in the context of the tools they already have. If you govern a product strictly by looking at drop-off metrics and support tickets, you become incredibly efficient at optimizing the existing paradigm. You build a faster, bug-free, perfectly usable ship.
But if you only ever build exactly what the data tells you the user needs right now, you never take the leap required to invent something entirely new.
Right. The data tells you how to make a better ship, but it will never tell you to invent the airplane.
Because users couldn't submit support tickets asking for an airplane before the concept even existed?
That is the ultimate hidden paradox of the PM role. You have to use data to relentlessly filter out bad ideas, but somehow remain open to visionary ideas that defy data entirely.
Balancing the safety of the analytics dashboard with the blind leap of faith required for true invention, that's a huge thought to sit with. It really makes you look at every app on your phone differently, knowing the sheer amount of negotiation it took to get a single button onto your screen.
Absolutely.
It just goes to show that decoding the everyday language of a workplace reveals the underlying machinery of how things actually get built. Keep analyzing the jargon around you, keep questioning the systems you work in, and keep digging into the mechanics of your own industry. Follow for more Workplace English.